Welcome to this video. My name is Chris Calder. I'm a member of the Cuplet Fern located in Sanford. This is a set of 3 videos I put together, partially based on multiple conversations I've had with different board members, which started back in May of 2018 when I attended the annual conference. Ann Cox had mentioned they were looking for a membership chair, and I approached Ann and said I have no interest at this time being the membership chair, but I do have a strong experience in memberships. In addition to, I worked for a nonprofit for 11 years, and dealing in technology, I had to deal with databases and membership databases and things like that. And then I had multiple conversations with other board members afterwards, and it seemed to indicate that what I was saying indicates some of the pain points for the organization. And this really initially started when I became a lifetime member and snowballed from there. But before we get into that, a little bit about me. I'm originally from Canada. I moved to Los Angeles to accept a job at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, also known as LACMA, which is the largest museum west of the Mississippi. It was there that I worked in technology, and when I left in 2011, I was director of information technology. And one of the last projects I worked on was putting all the IT infrastructure into this building here, which is called a Resnick Pavilion. You may have heard of the Resnicks. They're billionaires responsible for things like the Fuji water, palm water, almonds, and other things like that. And the reason why I mention that, and we'll circle back to this, they are responsible for putting the $45 million into this building that it took to build it, and also put another, I think, $10 million of either art or money to support the building. And the reason I mention that is because if that relationship wasn't strong, then obviously that building probably wouldn't have got built, and that money would never have been donated. After I left LACMA in 2011, I created my own software training company called Simon Says It. It basically started from scratch and built into a multi-million-dollar company. And one of the things I had to learn on my own was memberships, which included converting non-members to members, membership retention, membership renewals, dealing with expired members, focusing on higher value customers, which we'll touch upon shortly, content marketing, email marketing, customer satisfaction, just to mention a few. And a couple of things I want to mention before we start going and talking about donors. I have no ulterior motives here. I'm not a consultant. I'm actually retired, and happily so. So I put a high premium on my free time. So I have nothing to sell here other than my good intentions of attempting to make the organization stronger and helping us accomplish this mission. And the other thing I'll mention is that I have a lot of respect for volunteers, and this organization is built on people who put an incredible amount of volunteer time in helping the organization. So I'm not trying to insult anyone. I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers. I'm just trying to help the organization with some strategies I think, if you haven't already considered, may actually be helpful. Let's get going on here on donors. This is the first video of 3, so let's talk about donors. And this is based on my own experience as an outsider looking in, and it occurred back in 2019 when I decided to become a lifetime member. This is the first communication I received. It was an email from a non-FNPS email address from Cammie Donaldson, and this is the email I got. Thank you for your support. Please print this record for your records. Pretty basic email. Subsequently, I received a template thank you letter with the amount of money I donated auto-filled in. You could tell it was auto-generated, and then the signature, which appeared to be printed. For me personally, didn't leave with a warm and fuzzy feeling based on my own experiences working for a nonprofit, in addition to other donations I made. Just to give you an example, this is a nice handwritten note from our great president of Cuplet Fern, Mark Catelli. That was a well-written handwritten note, and just here's some other examples of some handwritten notes that I received. For me personally, it's important for a number of reasons. It's an acknowledgement, personal acknowledgement, but it also kind of indicates what is happening behind the scenes for the organization and how well do they look at their donors, and is it a well-oiled machine, just to name a few. And of course, not everybody wants that level of acknowledgement. Some people are just happy the way it is, and some people actually want more acknowledgement. Each person is a little bit different, but I think things like this could be an easy win. Instead of giving a printed letter that has a signature already auto-filled in, actually reaching out to that person, even if it's a handwritten note, maybe a phone call. Again and again, not everyone wants a phone call, but maybe looking at how you approach your donors a little bit different compared to, say, someone who's giving $35 every year. Here's another example of a handwritten acknowledgement. And the other thing I would mention is, with respect to acknowledgement, maybe approach it a little bit differently with respect to how you actually publicize that. Again, not everybody wants to be recognized, but for a lot of people, they do want to be recognized. Here's an example from the Southeastern Grasslands Initiative. This is how they publicize some of their donors. Another example from the 1,000 Friends of Florida, thanking their major donors. And these examples are quite common from my own experience, how people acknowledge their more significant donors. The other thing I would mention is it's really important, I think, to get to know major donors and really build that relationship. Of course, larger organizations have entire departments for donor management and project management, building those relationships, finding more about that person. But I think at the very least, if you're not actually tracking some kind of that data in your database, who this person is, without being obviously creepy or acting like a stalker, but this practice is quite common for large nonprofits where they'll do some kind of project management or donor management and build that relationship. And it's really obviously a mutual relationship because they're getting to know that person with the hopes, of course, that that person will eventually donate more money. I do want to dive a little bit deeper in the importance of larger donors, and there's something called the Pareto principle, otherwise known as the 80-20 rule. You may have heard of it before. For many effects or events, it means roughly 8% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. So a very common example would be 80% of the sales come from 20% of the clients. There's many examples you could provide. Of course, it's not scientific, but it's really a rough guideline that can provide valuable insight. One example would be for nonprofits. 80% of their revenue generally comes from a very small percentage of donors. And if you look at when they go through capital campaigns, a good example right now is LACMA. They're going through a significant capital campaign where they're going to be building a new building, which is going to cost north of $650 million. What they're not doing is going to individual donors and asking for $5, $10, $25. Most museums anyways, they have a silent campaign where they're going to individual donors who can give significant amounts of money, 20, 30, 50, 100 millions of dollars. When it comes to small folks like us, they totally ignore us because it's not worth the effort. And again, they're going to get a significant amount of money from a very small percentage of donors. That's why maintaining those relationships is extremely important. Someone who's donating today, you just don't know if they are in a position today, tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years down the road, who knows when, to really provide a significant donation down the future. So that's why that relationship and cultivating that and maintaining a really good relationship is important, not only from large donors, but also from your day-to-day donors who are doing $35 every year. So it's important to maintain that relationship. And a good example I've used for a long time for my own company, it's always easier to keep a customer compared to getting a new one. And yes, this is dealing with a commercial enterprise, but I would argue that that is no different from running a nonprofit. It's easier to keep that member compared to getting a new one. So if someone's giving you $35 every year, $500 every year, I would argue that it's going to be much easier for you to keep that person happy as opposed to trying to get and converting someone from a non-member to a member. And another thing I'd like to mention is donations of larger amounts can really indicate or flag someone who has higher disposable income. I'm sure there's not rocket science to you mentioning this, but I think it just drives home the importance of focusing on these folks, which means potentially larger future donations down the road. A small percentage of members or donors have the potential to donate a very large amount. Again, this is not rocket science, but I do want to look at it a little bit different. Again, I mentioned the Resnick. This is an important example where that building was built solely on one donor. Customers, I mean, a customer is not going to spend $200 on a cup of coffee, but someone or some are willing to spend $200 on an espresso machine. So if we look at the purchasing power of a very small percentage of people, we're going to find that they have the potential to spend a lot of money. If we go back to the 80-20 rule, let's consider NFL football teams. When a football team plays a game, the home team typically has tens of thousands of people in the stadium, 50, 60, 70,000 people, right? You can get a ticket to an NFL game for as cheap as $19. They are actually getting a significant portion of their revenue from a very small percentage of people. Sure, you can get seasons tickets, which may cost you $1,000. There's going to be thousands of people spending money on individual tickets and a very small percentage spending on season tickets. But there are luxury skyboxes which may cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So why do I mention this? Well, sports teams can get 50% of their revenue from only 1% of their customers. 1% of the customers are driving home 50% of the revenue. Again, that's not from the individual tickets being sold in the thousands. It's the really high-end customers. So here's an example. So if you look at 50,000 people, and it's just an example, but if you look at it this way, there may be 50,000 people willing to spend $100 on a football team. There may be 200 people willing to spend more than 10,000. Again, we just don't know who these people are, but it's just important to keep in mind there's going to be people who you're going to cross paths with who may donate a small amount of money. They may be willing to spend a lot more. So just to expand on this graph a little bit, left side is the price per ticket. The bottom left, you show the $100 ticket, and you see the 50,000 there, bottom left, and 50,000 people would be willing to spend that. If we go to the right, notice how the graph curves up there. It says $10,000, even though the graph only goes to $2,500 per ticket. So again, we'll expand on that a little bit more here. Here's another graph which shows willingness to spend money. And this graph shows the amount of money on the left, and it shows the number of customers who are willing to spend money on a specific item. And it could be even a donation. So the amount of people are willing to give a certain amount of money. In this example, 72 people are willing to spend $30. And then you show on the right, 40 people are actually willing to spend $50. So obviously, as the price goes up, the amount of people willing to spend the greater amount of money is going to decrease. If we drill down a little bit further, again, we see 40 people willing to spend $50. Now we have 8 people willing to spend $200. If you did math, 40 customers or donors spending / donating $50 equals $2,000. And we have 8 customers or donors spending or donating $200, which equals $1,600. And you're probably saying, well, that's not 80-20 rule. Yeah, sure it's not. $2,000 is obviously greater than $1,600, but we haven't taken into account a very small percentage of people who'd be willing to spend even more than $200, which could actually bring that amount up even greater, thus the old 80-20 rule. To reiterate, the importance of a small number of donors to potentially give a significant amount of money, and these people may be great potential for separate campaigns you're going to have internal with the organization. And of course, they're going to have the higher potential for much larger donations. And I would even argue there's interesting math to look at the 20% of the 20%. So if you even drill down on the 20% of the 20%, which is typically for large organizations, but that in itself can really yield some interesting insight. The 20% of 20% would be really high potential donors. The other thing I want to mention is a long-term value. So long-term value is often shown for commercial enterprises. Long-term value is the total value of each donor or member. Here's some basic examples. Jane Doe, she gives $35 for 10 years, equals $350. Plus she decides to donate a lifetime membership of $1,000 to the Florida Native Plant Society. Her lifetime value is $1,350. So we're going to compare that to John Smith. John Smith remains a member for only 2 years at $35. His long-term value is $70. Why is this important? It provides a baseline to help determine longer-term growth trends and also retention strategies. Your goal as an organization is to increase the lifetime value of your customer or your donor. And that can be done through a myriad of strategies. For example, membership retention, membership renewal, cultivating those relationships with potential higher donors, things like that. A higher average lifetime value equals higher gross revenue. Let's assume we have 1,000 members and our total revenue for these active members is $45,000. So your average lifetime value of your active members is $45. But the thing to keep in mind is total revenue for an organization is only one metric. It can really provide a false positive. For example, if we have 1,000 members and total revenue for these active members is $45,000, as I mentioned before, the LTV is $45 per member. So let's assume that was your total revenue last year was $45,000. And then this year, the total revenue for an organization now is $75,000. Everybody's clapping their hands and patting themselves in the back. Good job, everybody. That provides a false positive because even though your revenue went up, if you had 2,000 members, and your revenue was $75,000, your lifetime value for the active members is $37.50. So that's an important metric to compare to from previous years and ongoing. And it's an important one to keep an eye on. So your goal is to increase the average lifetime value of your donors and members. So this concludes the video I created on donors. The next video will talk about email renewals.